You can learn more about a person from your silence than you ever will from their words. And stop talking. Stop explaining, stop chasing, and just go quiet for a while and watch who gets uncomfortable, who disappears, and who actually shows up. And silence isn't empty, it's a test. And most people fail it. People can say all the right things when they want to be seen a certain way, and it's easy for anyone to present a polished version of themselves when life is convenient. Words are cheap, accessible, and often rehearsed to create an impression rather than reveal reality. But silence removes the stage, the script, and the spotlight, leaving only raw behavior behind. When you stop talking, stop explaining, or stop initiating, you create a space that forces truth to surface. The absence of noise becomes a mirror where people's real intentions reflect back at you. Some who promised support suddenly lose interest because the benefit they sought is no longer present. Others fade because the performance is over and the audience they wanted, your attention, is gone. Silence exposes who was there for connection and who was there for consumption. And when you remove your energy, your effort, or your availability, you immediately see who valued you for who you are versus what you provide. It is easy to show up when someone else is doing the emotional labor, the planning, and the effort to maintain the relationship. But when silence enters the equation, the balance resets and effort becomes visible. Silence reveals who notices your absence and who never truly valued your presence. The moment you stop reaching out, you learn who reciprocates and who relied on you to carry the bond. You see who remembers you without reminders and who only thinks of you when prompted. People who genuinely care step forward on their own without being asked or nudged. Those who disappear when you go quiet were only attached to the convenience of what you gave them. And when there is no more praise, no more attention, no more validation, and no more benefit flowing from you, watch who still remains. Appreciation is often loud when you are useful, but loyalty is proven in the quiet moments with no spotlight. Silence tests the foundation of relationships because without incentives, intentions become obvious. Someone may have enjoyed your company only when you entertained them, supported them, or made them feel good about themselves. Silence removes that emotional currency and reveals whether they were connected to you, or to the version of you that fed their ego. When the music stops, not everyone stays in the room. Pay attention to the people who stay when the environment is no longer exciting or beneficial to them. They are not there for the show, they are there for you. And there is a difference between people who disappear because they respect your space and people who disappear because they no longer benefit. Silence teaches you to differentiate between the two without confrontation or conflict. It shows you who understands that quiet does not equal rejection, but sometimes reflection or recovery. The right people don't need explanations to stay. They intuitively sense when you need space and remain supportive without demanding attention. They lean in gently, not to intrude, but to check that you are okay. Meanwhile, the people who were only there for what they could take react to silence with frustration, indifference, or detachment. Silence reveals emotional intelligence on one side and emotional dependence on the other. The contrast is undeniable when the noise fades. And when you stop filling every silence with reassurance, you learn who becomes uncomfortable because their intentions depended on your vulnerability. Some people thrive only when they know your fears, your doubts, and your need for reassurance, because it gives them control or superiority. But when you become quiet, when you hold your thoughts to yourself instead of oversharing, it threatens the dynamic they relied upon. Silence shows you who valued the trust you offered and who exploited it. People with genuine intentions feel honored by your openness, but they do not demand it or depend on it to maintain the relationship. Those with hidden agendas or self-serving motives lose interest the moment silence removes their access to your emotional world. They leave not because you changed, but because silence removed their leverage, And silence is not passive. It is a strategic pause that allows clarity to rise above emotional noise. When you remove words from the interaction, behavior becomes the only form of communication left, and behavior does not lie. In silence, you can observe patterns that words would have blurred or excused. You start noticing who follows through, who makes excuses, who stays consistent, and who only performs when watched. Silence gives you space to evaluate without interference, without persuasion, and without the pressure of immediate responses. It helps you see beyond charm, charisma, or verbal promises and focus on patterns. Because patterns tell the truth that sentences try to cover. Silence turns you from participant to observer, and observers see the truth that speakers miss. This clarity is what allows you to make decisions rooted in reality, not illusion. And silence also teaches you about yourself, revealing where you once tolerated noise just to avoid the discomfort of truth. Sometimes we fear silence because we fear what it might reveal about the people around us. We hold on to conversations, explanations, and continuous effort because we don't want to confront the possibility that we are more alone than we hope. But silence does not create truth, it only reveals it. It shows you where you overextended, where you ignored warning signs, and where you accepted words as proof when actions were missing. The discomfort of silence becomes a teacher, guiding you toward healthier boundaries and higher standards. It allows you to learn the difference between loneliness and peace, between being alone and being self-connected. Through silence, you gain the strength to stop chasing noise and start valuing presence. The way people react to your silence speaks volumes about their emotional maturity, their expectations, and their relationship with you. Some people understand that silence can be a form of rest, introspection, or personal space, and they respond with patience and calm. Others immediately react with insecurity, assumptions, or resentment because they interpret your quiet as rejection. They project their own fears instead of seeking clarity with empathy. Silence becomes a trigger for those who measure their worth by constant validation. It exposes who feels entitled to your access and who respects your autonomy. It shows you who values your comfort over their need for control. People's reactions to your silence are rarely about you, and almost always about their relationship with themselves. And when you go quiet, certain people begin to fill the silence with stories they invent to protect their ego. They assume you are upset, losing interest, or distancing yourself because that narrative feels safer than facing their internal fears. Instead of communicating, they choose conclusions. Silence tests whether people seek understanding through conversation or comfort through assumptions. Insecure individuals rush to decode your silence as a threat, while secure people hold space without panic. Their reaction reveals whether they relate to you from a place of love or a place of fear. Silence exposes the mental filters through which they view relationships. The loudest reactions often come from those who never truly listened in the first place. Silence makes them anxious because without your voice, they must finally face their own. And some people see your silence as a personal insult because they believe they deserve constant access to your thoughts, emotions, and presence. They confuse availability with obligation. Their reaction exposes a transactional mindset. As long as you are giving, engaging, or comforting, the relationship feels safe for them. But silence disrupts that dynamic and removes the advantage they had. You quickly discover who valued you as a human being and who valued you as a source of attention, validation, or entertainment. People who take your silence personally reveal their reliance on your energy to regulate their emotional state. The moment you step back, they act like something has been taken from them. Their discomfort uncovers a dependency that was disguised as connection. And there are people who treat silence as a doorway to deeper understanding rather than a problem to fix. These are the people who lean in gently, not forcefully. They check on you with empathy rather than accusation. They don't demand that you speak before you're ready, nor do they assume you are withholding something from them. To them, silence is not a lack of communication, but a different form of communication, one that requires patience and emotional awareness. They recognize that not everything needs an immediate response, explanation, or resolution. Their calm presence during your quiet moments reflects emotional maturity. You learn that safe people don't rush to fill the silence, they respect it. They wait for you to open the door rather than trying to kick it down. And silence also reveals who only values you when you are convenient. When you stop initiating conversations, offering support, or maintaining the connection, notice who lets the communication die. Many relationships survive not because they are strong, but because one person refuses to let them fall apart. Silence shifts that balance. It shows you who is willing to put in effort without being prompted. The ones who care will reach out without keeping score, without turning your silence into a guilt trip. The ones who don't will allow distance to grow because the relationship was never built on connection, only habit or advantage. Silence shows you who chooses you even when choosing you requires effort, and how people interpret your silence reveals their emotional wiring. Some see it as abandonment because they fear loss. Some see it as disrespect because they crave control. Some see it as space because they trust the relationship enough not to panic, and some don't notice at all, which tells its own truth. Silence acts like an X-ray for emotional capacity. It reveals who can handle discomfort without reacting destructively. It shows who can sit with uncertainty without demanding immediate answers. It exposes whether the relationship is grounded in trust or built on insecurity. People's reactions tell you whether they are capable of loving you or only capable of needing you. Silence helps you separate attachment from connection with clarity. And you will witness how silence makes emotionally immature people spiral into criticism, passive aggression, or attention-seeking behavior. They may accuse you of changing, abandoning them, or being cold, not because it's true, but because silence removes the emotional fuel they once received from you. Their reaction becomes a defense mechanism to regain control or pull you back into their emotional orbit. Instead of asking how you are, they ask what they did wrong. Or worse, they punish you for not giving them constant emotional access. Silence reveals who uses conflict to restore connection and who uses curiosity. Immature reactions highlight unresolved wounds disguised as personality. Silence becomes a mirror reflecting their emotional age, not their actual age, and at the same time, silence reveals the strength of the bond with those who understand your heart. These are the people who don't require explanations to remain loyal. They recognize silence as a moment of processing rather than a withdrawal of love. They trust the relationship enough to give you room to breathe without fearing the relationship will disappear. These individuals reach out with compassion, not entitlement. They ask gentle questions, offer support, and remind you that they are there if you need them. They do not force you to speak, but keep the door open for when you're ready. Their reaction is grounded in love, not fear. Silence strengthens relationships with such people because it deepens trust rather than threatening it. And silence also teaches you how much emotional responsibility others expect you to carry. Some people rely on you to manage their feelings, reassure them constantly, or maintain emotional harmony for them. When you go silent, they panic because they've lost their emotional stabilizer. They were used to you filling the space, smoothing the tension, and soothing insecurities. Silence reveals how much of the emotional labor was yours. It forces people to sit with their own emotions instead of outsourcing them to you. For some, that is uncomfortable, so they blame your silence rather than acknowledge their dependency. But those who are emotionally self-aware will reflect instead of react. And silence gives you insight into the hidden agreements that existed in the relationship, the ones you never verbally made but somehow ended up fulfilling. Maybe you became the consistent one, the listener, the fixer, or the emotional anchor without ever consciously choosing that role. When you step back, the imbalance becomes visible. Silence exposes roles that others expected you to play indefinitely. You learn who valued your presence and who valued your function. You learn who sees you as a person and who sees you as a resource. And once you see it, you can no longer unsee it. Silence pulls back the curtain and reveals the unspoken contracts you were unknowingly signing. Silence is not an absence of communication. It is a different form of data that most people overlook because they are too focused on words. When you stop talking and start observing, you begin to see what was always present, but hidden under noise. Silence allows you to step back from the emotional fog of conversations and witness patterns with a clearer mind. You notice who shows up without being reminded, who takes responsibility, and who avoids accountability. Silence gives you distance from emotional manipulation, excuses, and persuasive wording. It turns down the volume on charm so you can hear the truth in behavior. When words are no longer the currency, actions become the only language left to study. Silence gives you information that talking would have drowned out. It becomes data, clean, unbiased, and revealing. And when you remove verbal reassurance, you start to see who is intrinsically motivated to maintain their commitments versus who needed external pressure. Some people keep their promises only when someone is watching, listening, or expecting. In silence, their true work ethic, integrity, and character become visible. Those who act only when acknowledged expose their dependence on validation instead of responsibility. Others continue showing up with or without recognition because accountability is part of who they are. Silence reveals whether someone's consistency was genuine or performative. Many relationships, teams, and partnerships fall apart not because silence caused disconnection, but because silence revealed the lack of true connection or discipline. The absence of conversation reveals the presence or absence of integrity, and silence gives you the space to analyze without emotional interference or influence judgment. When conversations are constant, you can be persuaded by tone, empathy, or persuasive words rather than facts. Silence removes that influence and allows logic to breathe. It gives you the distance needed to see situations from a wider lens, not just the moment's emotion. You start evaluating based on patterns and outcomes, not intentions or apologies. Silence provides a timeout from emotional consumption. It gives your mind the ability to connect dots, notice red flags, and reflect without disruption. In silence, perspective expands because there is no external voice competing with your inner clarity. The answers you were chasing often appear only when the noise stops, and people often say trust actions, not words. But silence is what makes that possible. As long as words continue flowing, they can mask inconsistencies or justify behavior. Silence removes the distraction of explanations and exposes raw behavior. You no longer rely on promises about what someone will do. You can now see what they actually do. Without conversation, there is no justification for broken commitments, only the reality of them. Silence forces accountability to rise or crumble. You learn more from someone's consistency during silence than from their passion during conversation. Anyone can sound committed in words. Silence reveals who is committed in reality. When talking stops, truth steps in. And silence also exposes how much of your decision making has been influenced by other people's opinions rather than your own logic. We often discuss our choices to seek validation, reassurance, or permission without even realizing it. But silence forces you to hear your own thoughts instead of leaning on external voices. It teaches you to separate your inner voice from the echoes of others. When you stop sharing every idea or problem, You discover whether your decisions were authentic or shaped by fear of judgment. Silence returns ownership of your choices back to you. It teaches self-reliance in judgment. Through silence, you begin to trust your reasoning rather than outsourcing clarity to others. This is how personal authority grows, and silence is also a magnifying glass on effort. When you stop initiating, organizing, or pushing things forward, you learn who is genuinely invested in the relationship, the project, or the goal. Silence shows who contributes without being asked, and who only participates when pushed. It reveals the difference between someone who cares and someone who is comfortable benefiting from your effort. When you remove your energy, notice who replaces it with theirs and who disappears. Some people are willing passengers when you are steering, but silence reveals who is willing to take the wheel beside you. The data collected from silence is not emotional, it is behavioral evidence. It shows who is a partner and who is a passenger. And silence gives you a front row seat to people's natural tendencies, unedited. Once conversation stops, people revert to their default mode. You see who is proactive, who is avoidant, who is driven, and who is dependent. Silence is a behavioral audit. Without guidance, reminders, or communication, people reveal who they truly are. If someone cares, they act. If someone doesn't, they won't. Silence removes the scaffolding that talking often provides. It tests the strength of connections, character, and commitment without added support. In silence, authenticity surfaces because performance requires an audience, and silence removes the audience. What is left is truth in its rawest form, and silence also allows consequences to do the teaching that words could never achieve. Sometimes you keep explaining, advising, or warning, hoping people will change, but words often protect them from experiencing the full weight of their actions. Silence removes that shield. When you stop rescuing, reminding, or rationalizing for people, reality becomes their teacher instead of you. Silence hands responsibility back where it belongs. It allows natural consequences to unfold without interference. It teaches through experience, not instruction. People learn more from the quiet of accountability than the comfort of explanation. Silence is not punishment. It is a boundary that lets growth replace dependency, and silence is often misunderstood as withdrawal, but in truth, it is evaluation. It gives you time to observe from a place of neutrality rather than emotional reaction. It is not about ignoring. It is about understanding. Silence collects data that helps you decide your next step with clarity instead of impulse. In silence, emotions settle, truth surfaces, and intuition sharpens. The answers that seemed complicated become simple because silence stripped away the noise. Silence transforms confusion into clarity because it gives space for your mind to organize information. What felt overwhelming becomes obvious. Silence gives you the gift of insight, and insight gives you power over your choices. And silence is the environment where the truth reveals itself without force. It is not passive, weak, or avoidant. It is intentional, strategic, and wise. Silence shows you what is real when performance ends. It filters out the artificial, the performative, and the exaggerated. It uncovers what words try to hide and what energy tries to disguise. Silence is analysis in its purest form. It is the pause that prevents regret, the space that prevents misjudgment, and the clarity that prevents self-betrayal. Through silence, decisions become data, backed rather than emotionally influenced. It transforms perception into understanding. Silence is not empty, it is full of information waiting to be read. Silence is often misunderstood as distance or dismissal, but in reality, it is one of the strongest ways to teach people how to treat you without using a single word. When you choose silence instead of reacting, defending, or over-explaining, you shift the power dynamic back to your side. It shows that your self-respect is not negotiable, and you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. Silence sets a standard that says, if you cannot meet me with respect, effort, or understanding, I will remove my access. It becomes a boundary wrapped in calm, not conflict. People learn very quickly what behavior you will or won't engage with. You don't have to argue for your value. You simply stop granting your energy where it isn't valued. Silence becomes the teacher that words often fail to be. It is not the absence of communication, but the presence of self-control. And many people dilute their worth by over-explaining themselves to those who have no intention of understanding them. Every time you justify, defend, or repeatedly clarify what should be obvious, you unconsciously teach others that your boundaries can be negotiated through pressure. Silence disrupts that pattern. It stops the cycle of you giving emotional discounts to people who haven't earned them. Silence says, I don't need your approval to stand by my truth. When you stop engaging in unnecessary explanations, people become more aware of their behavior, their tone, and the way they approach you. Silence forces them to reflect rather than argue. It demonstrates that your peace is not up for auction. Through silence, people learn that you will choose dignity over validation every single time. They either elevate their behavior or lose proximity to you. And silence becomes a form of self-respect when you use it in moments where your words would not be heard, valued, or respected. Not every situation deserves your response, your emotion, or your energy. Silence protects you from engaging in arguments designed to trap you into emotional exhaustion. It allows you to say less but communicate more. When someone realizes you will not entertain disrespect, manipulation, or chaos, their behavior either adjusts or exits. Silence teaches people that your attention has to be earned, not demanded. It shows that access to you is a privilege, not a right. You no longer react out of impulse, but respond with intention. Silence matures your interactions by filtering out those who only thrive on noise. It shows that your peace is not up for compromise, and boundaries do not always require confrontation. Sometimes, the most effective boundary is silence. When someone crosses a line, silence creates discomfort that forces them to notice their actions. It is not revenge, it is awareness. Silence tells people, you felt comfortable crossing that boundary. I feel comfortable withdrawing access. It communicates clearly without conflict. Silence gives the other person an opportunity to self-correct without you having to lecture, warn, or repeat yourself. If they value you, they will adjust. If they don't, silence makes the separation smoother. Low-effort people disappear when silence removes the attention they fed on. Silence becomes the natural filter that keeps your life aligned with respect and reciprocity. It teaches people that your boundaries are non-negotiable. And silence is a powerful response to manipulation because manipulators rely on engagement, not truth. They need reaction, emotion, and defense from you to maintain control of the narrative. Silence disrupts their strategy. It takes away the fuel they use to twist your words, guilt trip you, or provoke emotional responses. When you respond with silence, they are left alone with their tactics exposed. Silence forces manipulators to confront themselves because they cannot hide behind the reactions they used to trigger. It takes away their ability to shape your emotions and story. Silence is not avoidance. It is protection from being pulled into psychological games. It teaches people that you are no longer a participant in their chaos. Silence becomes the shield that guards your mental and emotional peace. And silence also teaches others the value of your presence. Too much access makes people forget the effort, consistency, and warmth you bring into their lives. But silence reminds them that your presence was never guaranteed. When you step back, people have space to see what you used to contribute and what is missing without you. Silence leaves room for appreciation to grow. It makes people realize that communication with you is a privilege. For those who took your kindness for granted, silence becomes the wake-up call they didn't expect. It teaches that your energy was not free, it was a gift. Silence can transform relationships by rebalancing appreciation. Some people will rise to meet you with gratitude, while others will fade because they only valued you when you were accessible on demand. And using silence wisely requires emotional discipline because the ego often wants to explain, defend, or correct others. But silence is the choice of someone who is secure in who they are and no longer needs external validation to maintain inner peace. It is the decision to value calm over chaos, clarity over conflict, and dignity over impulsive reaction. Silence is not about winning, it is about preserving your inner state. It is a practice of maturity, strength, and restraint. Silence teaches emotional intelligence because it allows space for reflection before response. It gives you time to choose intention over impulse. And through this practice, others learn that you operate from self-worth, not insecurity. Silence shows that peace is your priority, not proving a point. And silence shapes the standard of how others approach you. When people know that you don't tolerate disrespect, they become more intentional with their words and actions. They learn to approach with clarity instead of confusion, honesty instead of manipulation, and respect instead of entitlement. Silence retrains the dynamic in every relationship around you. It teaches that access to you comes with responsibility. Those who value you will rise to meet those standards. Those who cannot will remove themselves. Silence reduces the need for constant boundary reminders because it enforces them without noise. It resets the tone of interactions, and ultimately, it attracts people who align with the energy you want to maintain. Silence becomes the standard that speaks louder than lectures, and the true power of silence is that it protects your energy while teaching others how to interact with it. It transforms the way you choose relationships, resolve conflicts, and maintain self-worth. Silence gives you control over your emotional resources. It prevents you from overspending on people who do not invest. It creates space for mutual respect to grow. It shifts your mindset from needing to be understood to choosing to be at peace. Silence elevates your life because it filters out noise, ego, and emotional clutter. It becomes your silent mentor, guiding you toward healthier connections and stronger self-respect. Through silence, you learn who deserves a seat at your table. And everyone else simply fades into the background, and silence is a language of strength, not weakness. It is the voice of someone who has learned the value of their peace and refuses to waste it on chaos, disrespect, or emotional immaturity. Use silence to protect your standards, to elevate your worth, and to choose yourself with confidence. In the end, silence teaches people what words never could, that your peace is non-negotiable, your value is not up for debate, and access to you must be earned, not assumed. Let your silence speak for you when explanations would fall on deaf ears. Let it guard your dignity when words would be wasted. And let it remind the world that you are not afraid to walk away from anything that costs you your self-respect.